call a meeting to order. First item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item is the minutes of this committee's meeting held Monday, June 28th, and recommendations to approve those minutes.
So moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 2 concerns a zoning bylaw text amendment to the RS7, RS8, RS9, RS10, and RS11 single-family zones. This is bylaw number 4131. Recommendations to give first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4131, that this bylaw and its related application be referred to public hearing, and that in addition to the regular public hearing notification, staff be requested to notify the following parties and organization: builders who have had recent building permits for single-family homes in the area, the recently established local builder developer liaison group and UDI, the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association, and the Northeast Ratepayers Association.
So moved. Second for discussion. Go ahead.
I just want to, I guess, compliment staff for taking some feedback and tweaking and I'm still relatively new at this, and I've always sort of been interested in how do we know we have a good plan, right? So what are the indicators that tell you that we have a good plan? And I'm pleased to see that we're taking some feedback and tweaking where we can. I have some reservation, a little bit, because what I appreciated about these zones was the fact that you weren't met by the garage door. When I first moved from Montreal to Richmond in the late 70s, I was amazed that all of Richmond was garage door after garage door, and it was so uninviting. So I just want to make sure that we hang on to the front door. I think that just creates a warmer community and a better sense of community. So I'd like to hear from the public. So far, it looks like it's okay. So I'm perfectly prepared to support this. That's it.
Councillor Reamer.
I just had one question in keeping in mind what Councillor Robinson has said. Does this text amendment put us more in line with some of the bylaws in our other communities for newer housing?
Through the chair, I would have to say that the current zones which encourage front porches and setting back the garages as it is now is fairly well in line with some other municipalities, for example, like Surrey. Mm-hmm. What this particular amendment is really trying to do, as Councillor Robinson was saying, was trying to address this so that it fits better on the irregular shaped lots without throwing away the objectives, the original intended objectives of this zone, which is to keep the garage set back and still having a front porch.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Asmussen.
Thank you. It's good, except I have concerns about the irregular shaped lots. I think that's good. I think that's needed. We had the variances before, which I think this cleans up, that you won't have to have them coming back. But on the regular lots where we're moving it up, the concerns that I have, once again, is we're creating in this thing, a 5-meter driveway, which most vehicles average vehicles about 16 feet. And you're encroaching now onto city property. If you have a pickup truck, you're now encroaching into the sidewalk on this. So that's the concern I have. Is also we're allowing suites. We allow suites in all these zones, and we want parking hopefully off the street. So a couple of concerns that I would like to see, because when you also look at the 4 meters with the front porch and having 1 meter offset off that, or the front facade, because I read through the bylaws, it's either or. You can also apply for a variance of 1.7 meters from that on that 4 meters, so it puts it down to 2.3. You add a 1 meter offset, you're at 3.3. What I would like to see on this one here is that we stay with the garage. Maybe you go to a 2 meter offset, that you keep the 6 meter driveway length. You can bring it forward, but you create that offset even further back for the garage. You keep that driveway space that you can properly fit a car, or if somebody has a pickup truck, on the driveway, that you're not encroaching now on city property or going to be blocking the sidewalk on the roadway. And I think you have to look at the variance that we allow presently within our bylaw to offset on that. So I think that's my one. I think one of the simpler ones would be to include in here, rather than a 1 meter, but a 2 meter back set to make sure you keep to a 6 meter driveway.
Erica?
Through the chair, thank you for that suggestion, and that's an excellent suggestion because we actually already considered that, and there is a requirement already in the zoning bylaw that requires accessory off-street parking space be no closer than 6 meters, because we had that very concern about bringing it too close where you couldn't park a car on the driveway.
Yeah.
So we already are at that with the 6.
So this will include, because it says 1
That's
meter.
correct.
So I just wondered if we need
That's
to
correct.
clean up and point that out within this. 'Cause
We can certainly clarify that as part of the public hearing brief to make sure that's clear in terms of that maximum setback for.
But it's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to keep that 6 meters.
That is correct.
Perfect, then I'm okay with it. That's good. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson, did you have any comments? No? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 3, is a report on an application for a citywide official community plan amendment bylaw 4127 and zoning amendment bylaw 4128. This relates to 1290 Pipeline Road, 1335 Pinetree Way, and a portion of Pinetree Way road allowance. Staff recommendation is that council give first reading to bylaw 4127 and 4128, and that these two bylaws and their related applications be referred to public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I gather, and after speaking to staff too, this is housekeeping. We're just moving the little bits of the puzzle around to make the land more plausible. So, okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is also a citywide official community plan amendment bylaw. It's bylaw 4138 and rezoning amendment bylaw 4139. These relates to 639 Tyndall Street. Recommendations to give first readings to bylaw 4138 and 4139, and that the two bylaws and their related applications be referred to public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Okay, this is for Tyndall Park. There's no family house on it, and it's just part of the park, and now it will be officially part of the park. So, thank you. Next item. Oh, vote, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I thought that was such a natural one, we didn't have to vote.
Item 5 relates to fourth and final reading of an official community plan amendment bylaw. This is bylaw 3990 and zoning amendment bylaw 3991. It's an authorization for the issuance of a development permit for a ground-oriented residential development at 835 Westwood Street. The staff recommendation is to give fourth and final reading to these two bylaws and approve the signing and sealing of the development permit.
Okay, do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So we've been touring numerous townhome complexes, Surrey and locally, and just paying attention to some of the detailing and how it changes the effect and the overall feel of the complex. And I just had a question in looking at attachment 2. One of the things that I noticed in the internal roads when they plant trees, it really actually changes the whole streetscape, the internal streetscape, considerably. And I noticed that the trees are only sort of partial. So blocks at the south, blocks B9, B10, B11 don't have trees on the internal road, and then block B1 doesn't have any trees. And I'm just wanting to check about, is that for any particular reason?
Michael Dollywall, the file manager on this, has a color version of that attachment that we'll put up on the screen for you.
Pictures, wow. There we are.
So,
I think we need a mic.
so on the south, the southern road, if you do look at the internal road, there's no trees at the where the driveway, where the garages are.
at the back.
Right. Because in the bottom block here, the units were really tight together. They weren't able to make the spacing for the tree roots to grow, as opposed to in this road right here.
Right. So the reason that the trees are there only on that part of the road is because there's actual space.
Exactly.
It's fine.
The right-of-way was wider.
Just to point out, it actually makes a huge, huge difference to have some canopy of some kind out there. So it's fine. But just to point out, I like trees.
I have to point out that I know staff, we're at fourth reading on this, and I know staff has fought their way along to get some larger amenity space in this development, and you know, it's a lot of houses on that property. So this developer has it up for him to make this the biggest and the best, because I think, you know, from here on we're really getting quite fussy about how our developments are looking at and the end product. So this will be a challenge. Councillor Reamer, did you have a question?
I didn't have any questions, no. Thank you.
Councillor Rasmussen?
Yeah, thanks. It's just, we talked in the report about the noise mitigation that's been done, but I guess the question I have is, what about the vibration mitigation? I mean, we've had people that live along Dudney over the years with big vehicles driving. We restricted big vehicles to the vibration through their homes. We're right beside a railway line. Is there any special mitigation factors that are doing within the construction of this? Because you're on a main line for a rail line, trains coming by. Is there anything to deal with the vibration mitigation for those housing units?
Wants to deal with this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe as part of the development permit application, we requested the applicant at building permit stage address some CMHC guidelines with regard to noise attenuation, but I don't believe there are any guidelines addressing the vibration. Well, that's an excellent suggestion.
Are we going to be following up on any of that?
I think part of our difficulty as staff is having some guideline or standard out there. Usually CMHC is the best resource by which to find those standard guidelines, and we were not successful in finding anything relating to vibration, only with regard to noise attenuation.
Well, thank you. That's unfortunate, because I do see this as being an issue coming forward once people start moving in there. We've had it around that area, a number of complaints over the years about the vibration along there. I know from transit that we were asked to take our buses from using along Westwood, Dudney in that area because of the vibration. The soil conditions actually make it fairly more difficult in that area. So this is the problem when we start putting in some housing in these areas that are close to mainline railways without, and there are mitigation factors that you can use to do some things. So I would ask staff once again maybe to go back and explore some extra ways of mitigating that, because if the developer will be gone, he will have done his development, but we as a city will be dealing with these issues and complaints on a longer term basis. Thank you.
Well, if I may, I ended up dealing in New Westminster some years ago with this because I had lived there for a while, and the apartment buildings are like 100 yards from the train tracks, and people are all upset because there's vibrations. Well, the train tracks have been there for 100 years, so I mean, when you build something next to a train track, you have to expect some. And the guidelines are minimum, I think, with CMHC. Is that not true? Because we work through everything we can. There really isn't very much you can do about it. So.
Well, I would hope we could look at this and try to create
well, then they should have a big sign up, note you're next to train tracks, which I think they'll know because they have to go over them to get there. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Certainly we'll relay that on to the applicant. As Erica mentioned, I know there was some discussion and looking at the CMHC standards for noise attenuation, so we'll certainly relay that concern, ask them to address that to the extent they can. And if I just go back to an earlier comment of yours, Madam Chair, this application's been in for a while. It's complicated because it's not only going through the process here at the City of Coquitlam, but also at the City of Port Coquitlam, and so there's been some back and forth. There was quite a bit of site remediation and preparation that had to be done, so they've been through a number of hoops. But the comment around the street trees, that's, staff will make note of that, and as Michael explained, the reasoning for that. But going forward with applications, we'll be looking for that too.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 6, is a proposed road cancellation adjacent to 2 King Edward Street, and it's Bylaw 4124. Staff recommendations to give first, second, and third readings to Bylaw 4124 and direct this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Community Charter.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 7 is relates to the Maillardville core area and potential development incentives. The staff recommendations that staff be directed to develop options for several non-financial development incentives for the Maillardville core area, including reduced parking requirements, increased density, and city-initiated zones of selected parcels, and report back to staff. Also, that staff be directed to prepare a proposed revitalization tax exemption program for the area, analyze potential financial implications, and return with a detailed program review for council. We have a presentation on this item from Mr. Wayne Beggs.
Okay, does someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Second for discussion?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Beggs. Oh, you need the big one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As noted, the purpose of the study is to identify some specific incentives that the city might consider to stimulate redevelopment in the Maillardville core area. This is work that the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Task Force requested, and it was endorsed by Council in November of 2009. The underlying premise here is that the approaches that are recommended are only recommended for Maillardville. There's some particular circumstances down there that warrant a particular approach, and it's based on a specific assessment of Maillardville. The presentation and this report are intended as a check-in with the Land Use Committee before we go and do any further work along these lines. So the focus of the research is understanding the developer's perspective. It's focused on identifying some property-specific redevelopment opportunities, identifying some possible development incentives that we might use, and understanding the home buyer profile for the area. The work undertaken, there were site visits, there was a review of property ownership records and assessment data in the area. There was consultation. There was consultation with property owners and their representatives, with realtors and developers, and with business owners. And there was a review of the incentives that were offered, that are currently offered by other municipalities, along with some discussions with the municipal planners that are working on those incentives. From a property ownership perspective, there are a number of challenges with this area. Some of the owners are not interested in redevelopment or in selling right now. They're not necessarily interested in different zoning. In some cases, they want more money for their property than the market will bear. And in other cases, they're adopting a wait-and-see approach. They want to see what's going to happen down there. There are land assembly challenges, so you'll have situations with 3 properties, and the property in the middle is not interested in selling or moving towards redevelopment. So that makes it difficult for assembly. And there are development constraints in the area. There's the topography of the area with the slope of the hill, but there's also some soil conditions in certain parts of the neighborhood that are impacting development potential, as well as the water courses that run through the area. From a developer's perspective, well, the developers see more opportunities elsewhere in Coquitlam right now. They're seeing the work that the city's doing in Austin Heights on planning, and also the business improvement area in Austin Heights, and they're seeing positive potential there. The Evergreen line coming is pointing to some positive potential for Coquitlam, and of course, you look outside here and there are cranes around City Centre, and with the Evergreen line coming, that's creating huge potential here. When they look at Maillardville, they're saying this is probably more of a pure residential market from their perspective at this point. Most see the area as wood frame at this time, and so you're not talking about towers at this point in time. There's some concern also noted over what the city's residential rental unit replacement policy is. That was noted by the developers. Here's a surprising finding. Financial incentives are always welcome. But what they noted was that these incentives won't necessarily change the fundamental project economics of any particular project there. They noted that, in fact, there was a number of other incentives that could be offered in the realm of higher density, pre-zoning of properties, or reduced parking that would make a difference potentially for projects. And I also noted that there are a number of things happening in the area. They recognize that there's a number of things going on in the area, but whether it's the Mackin Park and King Edward Street overpass, Mackin Park improvements, the proximity to Fraser Mills. And they note that there are several properties that are key to sparking redevelopment in that area. Just to turn to what they're doing elsewhere, other municipalities, some municipalities don't have any incentives in place. This would include communities such as Port Moody, Port Coquitlam, Burnaby, Langley Township, North Vancouver, Pitt Meadows. And in other municipalities, there are revitalization tax incentives. These would include Langley, Maple Ridge, and Surrey. White Rock and New Westminster are examining the possibility at this time. And then there's the pieces that we know from the media about what Surrey's done in terms of a large area where they're applying a number of different incentives. What we've heard from the other municipalities is that there's been limited impact so far. So what we concluded is that the municipal financial incentives will not change the fundamental market conditions, but they might help in some cases. We think that the revitalization tax exemption may have the most potential, but we think that it needs to be tested further. And the revenue impact on the city needs to be considered. And you'll note that at the back of the report, there's an appendix that offers a view of what one potential way of structuring revitalization tax incentive would be. Now, that's not necessarily written in stone as to how it would be, but it's to give the committee an offering of what it may look like. There's further work to be done to finalize that. We think that non-financial incentives should be further examined. These include looking at the things that we talked about earlier, higher density, possibly no density bonusing, but actually a grant outright of density in some cases, some pre-zoning work, and looking at reduced parking requirements. And one of the things that came through in this report is that there's clearly a matchmaking role that the city can play here if we're involved in discussions about what's going on in the local community there. So the recommendations are for further evaluation of those non-financial incentives, including those ones that I just noted, further evaluation of the tax the revitalization tax exemption approach, and to come back to council with a recommendation for a preferred incentive package that the council can consider. In closing, it's important to note that Maillardville's revitalization continues to be an area of focus for all city departments. And the approach outlined may not be a magic bullet, but it will signal that we're willing to work with the development sector to make things happen in Maillardville. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And as well, I worked on this with Jim McIntyre and Eric Vance. Both of them are here today as well to answer any questions.
Thank you for an excellent report. Are there any questions? Selena? Councillor Robinson?
Thank you. Thank you. I actually sit as vice chair of the Maillardville Revitalization Task Force, and so saw I guess the initial presentation and was quite excited to hear about some of the unintended outcomes, right? Which was that the process of just going out, talking to developers, talking to landowners, it sounds like there was a lot of learning and a lot of understanding about what the challenges were, and the matchmaking, which is a piece I want to get to, because you talk about next steps in terms of what a revitalization tax exemption might look like and what the pieces might be, which is great. But I want to know how you would maintain, or how we're going to maintain, this matchmaking role, because we can have all the policies, in neat little packages that we want, but unless we put them into the right hands and we follow up and we keep on people and we maintain the relationships with the developers who might be interested in the landowners, and we continually work that matchmaking angle. We can call you Yenta, the matchmaker. What's the plan for that piece? Because to me, that's the piece I think that is really critical.
I think that it would be a bit of a mixed role between myself in terms of picking up on those relationships that were made and continuing on with the conversation there. But I think there's also a role to play with planning and development. So it's a matter of us working together to continue to follow up on those conversations.
I'd actually like to see that as part of the plan in terms of next steps. I think it's important that sort of get documented.
Madam Chair, if I could on that, as Wayne said, we've worked quite closely. In fact, bringing staff from finance on this as well as along with the Deputy City Manager, John Dumont. So it's, and Sonia's always there in the wings as well. So it is a cross-department sort of corporate team effort. But a really good question, where we go from here. And we'll take that away. I think one of the things we can do, and to help keep that interest alive out there, we certainly promote it every chance we can, like with UDI, and we'll be doing that, I guess, also with our local builders developer group. So we'll always keep that on the agenda. But also through this process, Wayne and Eric went out and met with a number of property owners. In some cases, they were walking up and down the street, and people were curious and came out and just had an impromptu conversation, which was really good. That's where you connect with some of the property owners and businesses. So we have those contact names, and maybe we can follow up, just sort of keep them abreast of where we're at, where we're going, sort of keep that interest alive out there. So we'll take that as a suggestion from the committee.
Good, thank you.
One of the things that I'm pleased to see, I was going to ask that you do, but you already did it, is taking this back to the appropriate Maillardville committee, because sometimes people really need to hear the realities of what they've got, and that's the difficulty. The difficulty is for them to actually see what's out there and on the ground, and I think this is a good report for them to have. And sorry?
I'd like to speak to that.
Oh, Councillor Robinson wants to speak to that. But thank you for this. It's very good. Thank you to Mr. Vance, as usual, for his great work. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to I guess, update the committee. The response from the Maillardville Revitalization Task Force was actually, I think it was, it got their eyes opened. I think, revitalization, they think it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And the message was, it just might not be the time yet. That the message back from the developers was that it'll come, but it's just not at the cusp, just not ready. And I think it got people sort of sitting back and doing a bit of a reality check. So I thank you for bringing that up, that I think for them it was very, very useful to hear where they sat.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you're still there for the next one, aren't you?
Yes, I am, but there's no presentation, but I'm certainly here to answer questions
that's
here
fine.
and there.
I thought maybe you had another presentation. That's okay. Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 8 is the 2010 mid-year report on the Economic Development Plan. The staff recommendations that this report be received for information.
So moved. Second, and I have a question.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
I have a question for you, Mr. Beggs. In your report, I like actually how it's, you've made distinctions between actions, outputs, and outcomes. I appreciate that. And I just have a question about your outcomes for positioning the city. And you mentioned in your report that there are a number of signs that suggest that the messaging we're putting forward is effective. And you said number of signs, and I'm just curious sort of what you're looking for. What are some of the things that you're looking for that would let us know that people are getting who we are and that we're open for business?
I'm not sure if I'm on. Okay. Through the chair. Signs would be articles in papers, newspapers, articles in magazines, different press that's talking about our potential. It may be talking about events that are happening here. It may be just things that are out there in the media that are painting us in the right light. It also is based on conversations with other individuals out there in the greater metro area to see how they're perceiving Coquitlam. I know that following the UDI presentation that took place last November, that there were several positive comments that came out of that, and some folks were saying, yeah, Coquitlam's the place to be in terms of development in the next few years. So it's these types of things, and so it's not necessarily any one particular piece, but it's a number of different pieces. And I think I point in the report specifically to the Coquitlam Confidence article in the Vancouver Sun. I think that's reflective of the type of press that we're looking to get.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Further to that, my first question is, you indicated 5 pathfinding actions that have been undertaken, I guess, to assist businesses in overcoming some challenges. So I guess I'm just wanting to know what sorts of actions those might have been.
In some situations, pathfinding might be linking a business up with potential vending situations. So some of our businesses, I'm finding through meeting with them, aren't necessarily aware of procurement opportunities with other levels of government or with major projects that are on. So that might be one possible pathfinding piece. In other situations, there may be specific issues that they're having with signage or getting their name out there, and so there's some help that we've worked with particular businesses on in terms of that, and that's just an ongoing process on that one right now. In other situations, it may be that there are businesses working in the community that have that are doing complementary work, and they don't necessarily know that they're out there. So it may be the opportunity to hook up one Coquitlam business with another Coquitlam business for a supply relationship, and that keeps the money circulating within our community rather than going out to other municipalities.
Okay.
So those are 3 examples.
And further to Councillor Robinson's question, are we keeping track of numbers of business licenses as well? And are we keeping track of business licenses that are canceled and those that are new?
Yeah,
for follow-up purposes?
We do keep track of that information. It's not always the most informative, though, because we find that when the economy sours, you'll actually have more business licenses because people will go into will start small businesses. So it's a bit tough to follow that one as an indicator.
Okay, thank you.
Do we get, shall we call them exit interviews from people that are leaving the city?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't to this point, but that's certainly something that we could entertain.
That would be something I'd be interested in seeing. And just on this whole economic development plan, I'm looking forward to big things next year because I think we've all rolled up our sleeves and we're moving forward because hopefully the economy is going to change, and I think we've seen a bubble come back, and I know in the real estate market we saw a bubble come back, and now it's sort of settled down and it's like Jell-O, which is a happy time because things are more reasonable all around and more level, and hopefully next year we're going to look forward to a busy year. But the one thing I've always wanted to do with developers and Maillardville is challenge them all to come and create our French Village. Because I don't think there's anywhere else in the Lower Mainland that there is an opportunity for a developer to come and actually do something like that. And I know when we were all in Quebec at the FCM and we fell in love with the streets and that, and we see it. We can see it. I know we all see it here, and there's lots of opportunity for small business in a setting like that. And that would be a challenge. I'd just love to get out in one of these newspaper reports is, are you a developer with vision, and are you a developer who wants to take advantage of a great opportunity? So that's just a side. That's just a wish. Anyhow, all in favor of the report? opposed, nobody. Read on.
Item 9 concerns the potential establishment of an economic development and investment advisory panel. Staff recommendation is that council approve the proposed advisory panel and that staff be instructed to report to a subsequent executive meeting regarding membership.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, opposed, carried. And I believe we're done.
Madam Chair, that is the last formal item on the agenda.
Move adjournment?
I was here.
And again, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Reamer, what can I say? Look at